I investigated exactly where your recycling goes, even when you put it in the right bins. And the truth is, most of it is not working the way you think. And in some cases, you're kind of being lied to. As the founder of an award-winning sustainability-first commercial cleaning company with 50+ staff, I have spent years digging into what the waste system actually does versus what it claims to do. Starting with a simple paper coffee cup, I am going to explain exactly why you can't recycle many things that you all thought you could. I will look at the recyclable symbol, what the word compostable actually means, and reveal some nasty reality about the UK's recycling setup. It all starts with a symbol, one that appears on almost every piece of packaging you see. Next, a single word that sounds even more responsible than recyclable. And finally, what actually happens inside the recycling process itself. And this is the part the industry almost never talks about. 3 things. By the end of this video, you will never look at the bin the same way. I promise. Let's start with that symbol, that triangle made of arrows. 3 of them chasing each other. And this is where most people make a huge assumption that that symbol means it will be recycled. Sorry to burst your eco bubble, but it does not mean that. And it never did. That triangle is actually a material code. And all it does is tell the repurposing facility what type of plastic it is dealing with. It does not tell you whether your council collects it or whether it will actually be recycled rather than just chucked in the landfill. It tells you the material is technically capable of being recycled. Under the right conditions though. Conditions which almost never exist in the point you put something in that bin. Here is an everyday takeaway coffee cup. You see the recycling symbol on it. You put it in the recycling bin. You feel good about it. However, where I manage waste streams across nearly 100 facilities in the UK, I see exactly what the data suggests. The trail usually stops very short at a standard recycling mill. A paper coffee cup is actually fused with a thin layer of polyethylene. Translate this into plain English, a plastic film bonded to the fiber to make it waterproof, which is obviously quite essential if you don't want to be wearing that overpriced oat milk latte on your morning commute. But polyethylene fused paper can't be recycled like you would think. To recycle it, those 2 materials have to be separated. A process that requires very specialist equipment that, surprisingly, most standard recycling mills simply do not have. In the UK, less than 1% of those cups currently reach any specialist facility. Not because people don't try, of course we all try our best, but because the collection infrastructure was never actually built. The cup that you thought went to recycling almost certainly went to a landfill or incineration. And it is not just coffee cups that are far less recyclable than we all thought. When brands choose colors for their packaging, they are actually making a decision that affects whether that packaging can be recycled at all. Black plastic, in particular, often cannot be detected by the optical sorting systems. That is in the system that uses cameras to help identify and sort waste that needs to be processed. Black plastic often just passes straight through and straight into the residual waste for, you guessed it, incineration. But for marketing teams and billion-pound businesses, the color was chosen to catch your eye. The effect on recyclability was truly just an afterthought. Whilst that sounds all doom and gloom, and why don't we all just give up recycling completely, there is actually something you can do to help with the calamity of confusion. What you can do is quite simple actually, and that is to just look for a different symbol. The label to look for in the UK is not the triangle, it is the OPRL label. Either recycle or don't recycle, and it reflects that actual collection infrastructure in your area, what your local waste management service can actually handle. If a product has only the triangle and no OPRL label, it is telling you what the material is, not what will happen to it. Those are 2 very different things. Now, another area of recycling that most people get very wrong is the word compostable, which, to be honest, sounds even better than recyclable. right? But it's even more problematic than people assume. Compostable packaging has become one of the most visible signals that a brand takes sustainability seriously. The labels say plant-based, good for the earth. Some say home compostable. But I am sorry to announce that most of it ends up in exactly the same place as the plastic it was designed to replace. The word compostable on packaging has a precise technical meaning. It means this material is certified to break down in an industrial composting facility at 55 to 65 degrees Celsius with controlled humidity and a specific microbial environment over a defined time period. It does not mean it will break down in your garden, in your council food waste bin, or anywhere else for that matter, unless that specific infrastructure exists at the end of its journey. In the UK, that infrastructure does not actually exist yet at the scale that is actually required. Think of compostable packaging as a check written against an account that does not exist yet. The intention behind the check is genuine, but if there is no account to cash it against, well, the check is worthless, unless that account is actually created. At least it makes us feel like we are doing something. Most of UK councils sends food waste to what's called anaerobic digestion, which is not composting. It is completely different process. The packaging does not break down. It is put out as a contaminant and sent to landfill or incineration, just like those coffee cups. Even if the label says compostable, even if you put it in the correct bin, it doesn't enrich our soils like imagined it was going to. Before we explore how actually unclean real recycling is, I want to unpack the truth of another label. This time the word is biodegradable. Biodegradable means it will break down eventually under unspecified conditions over an unspecified timeline, and it is largely unregulated. It can mean almost anything. Compostable means what I just described: specialist facility, controlled heat, specific time frame. It is a real standard, but it requires infrastructure that almost nobody in the UK has access to at the point of disposal. There is a subcategory of the compostable label that sounds even better than compostable: home compostable. This means it should break down in a garden compost bin. But a UCL study, that's University College London, found that 60% of certified home compostable plastic did not fully disintegrate, even under a garden composting conditions. Because a home compost pile sits at 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, the process actually needs 55 degrees. So what should you do with all your compostables? Check if your council operates an industrial aerobic composting collection. Very few currently do. If yours does not, the correct bin for compostable packaging is actually general waste. Not the recycling bin, not the food waste bin. The old, evil general waste bin. Yeah, really. This is the part that feels the most wrong, because we have had recycle drilled into us for the last 35 years. Putting it in the food waste bin does not make it compostable. It makes it contaminant in someone else's correctly sorted food waste. I have spent 14 years in the commercial cleaning industry, but at home, I am just a dad, trying to make sure the world my daughter inherits isn't just a mountain of green labeled landfill. I am building a business I want her to be proud of, not one that just checks boxes. If you or someone you know needs commercial cleaning that does things properly and not just for eco credits, you can visit my website and book a discovery call using the link in the description. When we picture recycling, we picture kind of a clean loop. Waste material goes in, new material comes out, and nothing is wasted. Be honest with yourself, this is probably how you imagine the recycling process to look, right? So many people are guilty of this, but it's not your fault. It is how big corporations want us to think, so that we don't question the process. But the reality of the recycling loop has some details in it that almost nobody communicates. First, let's start with plastic. Every time plastic is recycled, the material loses quality. To compensate, virgin plastic produced from fossil fuels must be added to bring it back to standard. Recycling plastic extends the life of the material, but it does not yet replace the need for a brand new plastic production. Think of recycling plastic like photocopying a document. The first copy is almost as good as the original. The second copy of the copy is slightly worse. Each generation loses resolution. Eventually, you have to go back to the original to get a clean version. Virgin plastic is that original. And there is one more, closer to home than most people realize. Recycled toilet paper is marketed as the sustainable choice. And compared to cutting down 1,000-year-old forest, it is. Now, I'm not saying virgin forest paper is better. We have got to stop the deforestation, obviously. But we have to be honest about the chemistry we are putting against our skin in the name of green. Because choosing the lesser of two evils only works if you actually know what that evils are. To turn gray recycled toilet paper white, it has to be bleached. While modern processes are an improvement, they still have an environmental cost. Then there is BPA, a documented endocrine disruptor found in thermal received paper. Think of the endocrine disruptor like a body glitcher. Your body uses hormones as internal text messages to tell it how to grow and stay healthy. But these chemicals act like fake messages that confuse your system. Since receipt paper gets recycled into the general stream, the BPA can transfer into the finished product, including the toilet paper you use on some very sensitive areas. Now, this is absolutely not an argument to stop recycling. And if that's what someone takes away from the video, they might not have listened very closely. It is an argument for properly understanding which materials the system handles well. Not just blindly throwing your waste in one of 3 or 4 standard bins like brainwashed member of society. Plastic and paper are worth recycling, but they aren't perfect loops. However, aluminium and glass, you will be very pleased to know, are different. They can be recycled infinitely without quality loss or virgin top-ups. A can recycled today can be back on a shelf in 60 days. That is genuinely closed recycling loop. Good news. More good news is that every ton of glass remelted saves around 580 kilograms of CO2 and roughly 40% of the energy required to make it from scratch. So, is recycling mostly a hoax? No, of course it is not, in the grand scheme of things. But we are in a constant battle against big corporations and government advice to cut through the marketing and actually understand the recycling potential of the products and packaging we use daily. The recycling symbol was applied to products before the infrastructure to back it up even existed. The responsibility was placed on you, while the system design was left almost completely unresolved. That is not a hoax. It is an information gap. People putting cups carefully in the recycling bins aren't wrong. They are responding to the incoming data. Recycling absolutely works for glass, for aluminium, and for cardboard materials, where the infrastructure actually matches the promise on the label. Where it fails is where the sustainable label moved faster than the operational reality. The gap is not filled by good intentions. It is filled by building the systems that should have been there in the first place. This is why we started a cup recycling campaign in Portsmouth called Cup Cycle. We didn't just put a symbol on a bin. We built collection stations, created clear education, and explained the why. And the result was immediate. People started separating lids and emptying liquids, not because they were told to, but because they finally understood the process. Awareness leads to action, which leads to habit. When I take my daughter to the glass bank, she calls it going for a smashing time. She's right. It should feel exactly like that. Easy, obvious, worth doing, even fun. A small act that connects to something real at the other end. That is what a genuinely closed loop looks like, where the material you put in becomes the materials that comes out without compromise. The answer to the recycling scam isn't to stop caring. It is to demand system where the label always tells the truth. If you want more evidence-based content of what actually works in sustainability and cleaning, subscribe. If you want to apply any of this in your building or business, you can book a call with me. The link is in the description.